I'd like to call the August workshop of Riley Purgatory Bluff Creek Watershed District to order. Always, I would like to first welcome Bonnie Nelson, our new manager. She is with us virtually this evening, and I would like to congratulate her on being a new member of our board. I'd also like to congratulate Jill Crafton for her reappointment to our board as well. So now that we have the welcomes in order, let's have a roll call, please. Mr. Smith.
Manager Crafton,
Present.
Manager Duval,
Present.
Manager Nelson,
We can't hear you, Manager Nelson.
She's muted.
You're muted.
Can you hear us, Manager Nelson?
Perhaps we'll come back to her.
Do me to call her?
Ziegler,
Present. That
and President Pedersen.
Present.
We're going to work on developing not only a connection, but also, especially for the board meeting, an understanding of the circumstances and remote participation, and get that sorted out.
That would be wonderful. Thank you. Okay, so I think we could probably proceed. Mr. Jeffrey, would you like to start?
President Pedersen, manager. So tonight in this workshop, welcome. We are going to go through the draft Ecosystems Health Action Plan that was provided to you in a SharePoint folder. Hope is to really get the board to give us, a thumbs up. You're heading in the right direction. Here are some changes we'd like to see. We want to talk about the overall concepts, the takeaway message that we as staff got out of it when working with the technical advisory panel. We want to talk to you about the metrics that we use to evaluate the strategies within the EHAP and get your input on those metrics that we used. If they're weighted fairly, if there are things that we should be considering in addition to those. So we'll go through those. I want to remind everybody that this is not necessarily an actionable plan. This is the groundwork, the foundation upon which we will build our 10-year plan. So we'll talk through it quick, how we got to this point, why we undertook this plan, go from there. So why did we undertake this plan? Well, let's take this one example, but there are numerous examples of developments that have come in, and we look at a specific parameter, and that parameter is discharge off the site. And if that discharge off the site or end of pipe is better than existing conditions through modeling, then we say that it meets our standards. But intuitively, I think the board and others have agreed that that cannot necessarily be the case. So we started thinking about, the board actually started thinking about taking a more systems-based approach. How do we look at all of the things that are present on a site when we consider it? So here's just a really generic web. Each of these individual circles could be hundreds of their own cycles within them. So to capture all of it, I like to think of the Stephen Wright joke, which says, I have the world's largest shell collection. It's spread out on the beaches all across the world. We could not model all of the interactions. There's no possible way we could consider all of the interactions, but how do we consider enough of them so that we are thinking of the entire ecosystem and the benefits within it? And remember, our central focus is ultimately going to be the water bodies, but I think everybody in here has stated at one point or another that the watershed is the important part of it. It's that area that's draining to the water bodies and how do we address it there. But I also want to remind everyone that this is where it gets tricky. You know, there are constraints that we have on us. There are limitations to what we can do. You know, we do have a broad lane within which we can operate, but there are guardrails on it. Some of those guardrails reside in just the scientific knowledge that's out there. Is there enough? And how do we take, there's a lot of information out there that says altering or modifying landscape is going to result in altered hydrology. There's dearth of information though about, okay, well, how do we go the other way? Correct it, and what's going to be the outcomes of that. So that's one of the limitations, but more so it must be defensible. Whatever we do, I think we've seen over these last 18 months that with the Mira suit and other suits that people are watching what we do and the people will hold us to account. So we need to make sure that we stay within our guardrails. But I do think we still have a very wide lane within which we can operate. But there's the Minnesota watershed laws, and we need to abide by them. So it has to be defensible legally and scientifically. We can't use intuition or anecdotal evidence to justify doing something. We need to be able to sit down with whoever's proposing it, or when we put our budget together and say, yes, we are doing this because X, Y, and Z shows us, demonstrates that it is the right thing to do. So now I just want to talk a little bit about so what I would like this, well, here, quick the history, because it has been 18 months since we began this process to bring everybody up to speed. So in February of 23, the board ordered this project. We undertook literature review. We've done a lot of data collection. Zach Dickhausen and Rachel Whittington have been doing soil testing. Actually, Elena Portuguese began it when she was a Green Corps member. We are now partnering with the Arboretum to collect additional data out there. There have been a number of CAC members who have volunteered their property, board members. So we're gathering a lot of data. We met with technical advisory panel, and unlike our TAP or our TAC, Technical Advisory Committee, we decided that it was really important to bring in planners, bring in the people who are actually writing the municipal plans so that we can align as much as possible. We can break down those silos and work together. So our first TAP, we really just focused on what is a healthy urban ecosystem? What can we really try and get to? The second and third taps, we really focused on what information already exists, what are people already doing, what are the gaps that are out there that we can fill in, and then what initiatives could we take, or what strategies that are put into the EHAP could we take moving forward. The fourth workshop happened in January of this year, and that one we did invite engineers in. We really broke people into their cohorts of what their responsibilities are. We spoke to the engineers, public works, water resources people, the planners, and natural resources folks. And that one was really eye-opening and enlightening in that it really kind of drove home the point that even within an organization, there is that silization that prevents dialogue. You know, we heard from natural resources folks say, yeah, we would love to be able to do that. We're brought into the design too late, or decision makers aren't really necessarily listening to us all the time. In March, we had that joint CAC Board of Managers workshop, and that brings us to today. Our hope is that we get good feedback from you. We bring this back to you in September. With any changes or suggestions, adoption at the October board meeting. And we'll discuss what that adoption really will mean. But ultimately, this is going to be the kickoff for the 10-year plan. We're going to take those strategies, work them into actual initiatives that we can take. Now, when we get to the strategies, within each of those strategies, there could be dozens of specific tasks that we can do. There's really no way we can do it all. I mean, it just, we don't have even if we staffed up to be as big as a Cap region or Rice Creek, we're just not going to be. So we really got to focus on where are we going to get the best benefit, where are we going to get the most multiple benefits as we move forward. So I thought what we would do next, or we thought what we do next is Liz, myself, Fred, and Scott would talk a little bit about what our takeaways were going through this process, and then get your feedback, what your takeaway is. Manager Crafton participated in some of those. Manager Nelson also participated in that as a CAC member. I'll begin, but please, anybody interject. I'd rather this be a dialogue than me just giving you a speech. So that goes as well for Liz, Fred, and Scott. If there are things that I'm not touching on or that you took away differently, please put forward. My biggest takeaway was partnerships. There isn't a single entity or agency that can do all of the things that we're looking to do. And part of that is by design. Everybody has their purview, their roles, and their responsibilities. But what I discovered through the process, a lot of groups have already done a lot of things. There's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of climate resiliency action plans that have been done. There are ecosystem or ecological plans that have been done, natural resources plans that have been done, but they're all just sitting in their own individual thing, and nobody's really taking that all together and thinking about it. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of experts out there that we can tap into, but how do we tap into the ones that really can affect change, that can foster change to move forward? We need to be selective where there's the greatest opportunity. The general feeling I got from the workshops was that everybody saw the need for it. Some were gun shy, afraid of really going in that direction, and what kind of political capital would that spend. But more so what I saw was a lot of head scratching. Like, I don't know what I can do. I don't know what I don't know. I don't know what's already out there. I don't know how we can all work together. I don't know about these other initiatives that American Planning Association or others are doing. Communication is lacking, just what I said. We don't know what others do. Some entity needs to take that lead. It needs to be the one who brings in all of these groups. Not here, I was hoping. So I spoke with somebody from that council today, Jen Cater, who many of you might know. And Met Council is putting together their new 10-year plan. And one of their focuses is really reaching out to LGUs and finding ways to collaborate and to work with them. So what I kind of heard from the people at the TAPS was that's a role they saw the watershed taking, being that umbrella that brings everybody together and moves forward. And then with the partnerships also, while we didn't bring private developers in here, we did hear enough from planners and others that I don't think it's inherent within a planner that they want to be poor environmental stewards. I think on the Spring Road parcel, we met somebody who clearly does not want to be destructive of the environment, wants to. So how do we work? I guess a better way of putting it is stick the only way to deal with developers. Are there ways that we can, Minnehaha Creek has formed partnerships with them. Browns Creek has formed partnerships. We did it, although not smoothly ourselves. So I think there are lessons learned that we can take from that. The other thing I took away from these meetings are the incongruencies. By that, I mean, a municipality has a number of priorities, and those priorities don't always align with each other. We're fortunate in that. Just lose it for a second. We're fortunate in that we have a primary focus. But cities have public safety, they have transportation, they have mass transportation, they've got economic development, they've got sewer and water, they've got all of those other things. So is there a way, to reach some consensus? Compromise will be necessary. It'll be imperative to accomplishing it. And then if you look at zoning ordinances, if you look at engineering specifications, a lot of those are outdated, archaic, or perhaps even have been a great example. You look out at our parking lot here, they have formula for deciding parking space. Well, those were designed at a different time and prior to remote work. Are there ways to break down those incongruencies? Or there are, and we did it ourselves with our rules. We try and fit things into existing rules rather than just ripping it down and starting over again. So there's that ripple effect that goes through. You make one little change here and you don't notice all the other implications that it has to your code. Science, I talked about that already. I mean, there's an abundance of information about why these things are bad. Not a whole lot about how do we turn it around. And that might be our role. That might be part of what we do. And that's why I really want our plan to be as adaptive as possible, not have so much specificity that as new science emerges or as new initiatives come out, we can't adapt and utilize those. Again, I think we need to be that nexus to form those partnerships between different research organizations, academic organizations, municipalities. I was at a climate conference. It was in New Hampshire. It was pre-COVID. And I sat next to another gentleman on a panel. He and I were both the non-doctorates in there, and he leaned over to me and after listening to everybody, he said, "That's why they need us." Because they need to be able to communicate this really heady information in a way that it can be digested by the lay people. The last thing and the biggest takeaway really was education and outreach. There wasn't a single strategy or initiative that could be accomplished without educating some population and getting them on board with what we have. The decision makers need to be involved from the get-go. I mean, I even remember from working in the city, as you probably do as well. You could come to us with an idea and we could be as enthusiastic as possible about it. But if by the time it moves up through the chain of command and gets to the top, they're like, no, it's done. So we really need to get to those decision makers. And that siloization. That's the other part where education outreach can break it down. Even within an agency, especially the larger it gets, the more bureaucratic it gets, the less there's conversations. We had on Lotus Lake a recent major violation where American Lotus was treated in several acres. Just finding the right person at the DNR to go address it was cumbersome because there are so many people that deal with vegetation management. There are those that just deal with the shoreline recreational, those that deal with AIS. And you have just one CO for a really large area. The Spring Road. I have been reaching out to the DNR and finding out information about that property for our own. And I found some letters that were put together by the DNR, but they never seemed to make it to the area hydrologist or to others. So it's that siloization, everybody working in their bubble. So those were my takeaways from it. But what I really want to drive home, these are strategies that came out of the EHAB. I found these to be the most pertinent and how do we address them moving forward? How does our new day-to-day paradigm change? Brad, what did you take away from all of those meetings that you were
Okay.
privy to?
For me, there's two takeaways, and the first one is really what we wanted to communicate that I just want to underscore, that really everything that we're suggesting and came to in this is outside of what you already do. So it's like all that document in all those actions are added to what you're doing, because we're looking at the rest of the ecosystem. And the one thing that most watershed districts aren't really looking at is that of the green space. And so what we were trying to communicate in here, that the green space is altered. Mostly it's all set aside. It's good. You know, it's working fine. It's infiltrating. It's filtering. If rain lands on a green space, be it a lawn or a prairie or a woodland, it's good. We're saying we know that's not true. And that's, you know, the third section in the document was getting to the science and why that's true, you know, why it's not true, that there's an altered hydrology in green space, that it's sealing off, it's not infiltrating, there's more runoff, and the quality of runoff is poorer. So that was just one thing that, you know, that really every square foot matters. You know, we're a watershed district, and we're now kind of shifting into the watershed more, you know, we stepping out of our jurisdiction, but then this is where the partnerships come in. You know, how do we work with others that do have jurisdiction on what happens on the land? So that was one thing we wanted to communicate. And then the big takeaway from the series of meetings really builds off what Terry said, is I was surprised how city staff were really open to this approach. They get it. I mean, it wasn't like we were, you know, they understand that hard surfaces and parking lots and roads are detrimental. They would like to do more prairies. They get that. They think lawn is wasteful. But they really need the science. And this, I think, where the watershed district can come in. They need the science. They need somebody at the table when they have their meetings, you know, with these departments that are siloed, when they're looking at a development plan, or when they're pre-meeting with a developer before they're writing a plan, there is nobody in the room that understands ecology and water resources, typically, or not in the depth where we would really like to see it go, to really incorporate many ecosystem functions. And they're open to it. Like they were asking for it. Like, please come, sit at the table with us, participate, give us data, you know, develop fact sheets. You know, they're talking about all kinds of things. You know, if you could just provide us this kind of information, you know, then they need something at their backs. You know, they have the engineers at their backs for engineering. They have, you know, planners that can do the planning things. But really, with ecosystem, there's just nobody in the room speaking to that. And that's where I think there's a role for the watershed district. They were kind of looking to us, like, can you help us with this? You know, that's, you know, I think you'll need 2 Terrys to do that, because, you know, with all the meetings that you could attend with the cities within your district, a second Terry would be perfect. And then, you know, you can attend these meetings. So that was my big takeaway, was like, they're interested in help.
Just quickly on that, a couple of things out of those meetings have already happened. So for instance, Bloomington is already sending us all of so they have a development review panel, and they send out the email blast, and they have now included all the watershed districts on their development review panel and sent it to us. City of Janus, you've already seen, they come to us. In fact, they went out for bid on the Frontier Road, and when in their bid package, they state that the watershed has done some feasibility work, and you must consider that in your bid and design. So we're already in just those brief meetings, we are already seeing benefits come out of that. So
Add something?
your meeting.
So So we've got an active group in Bloomington, but I've been part of a small group that's been talking to the city about native plant ordinances. What we need to change, so people like me that have plants that are tall as I am can be protected, and that there's a way to say this is being managed for habitat or wildlife or a specific thing, so this is good. And I remember in the meeting, I think it was the deputy public works person, and she said, we need more sustainability approach to this whole thing. I mean, so I'm seeing citizens are already out there. We're seeing Liz interacting with Minnetonka folks and putting on programs and having Ain Journey do walks. And so I think there's that other, in addition to what Fred's talking about, there is something alive and moving, and people are part of that process. And I remember when Liz was talking, you're new, fairly new, but you were talking to the CAC and trying to explain what a watershed was. And it was like about where the water drains. And it was like, the light just went on for me. It was like, we've done our rules, and it's like, well, you can't exceed existing. But, and that's where we did those charts about the 10%, 55% runoff changes. It's not just about where it drains, it's about what the heck we've done to the landscape to alter all of that. So when we think about our aquifers being sustained, when you think of like an Eden Prairie that's taking their water right out of the aquifer, if we're not recharging any of that, whatever. But I do think there's also an active Friends of Minnetonka Parks, or, I mean, I think there's another group that we can tap into at the same time. I think the thing that's just took me a long time to get to was when we did the rules, it was like, well, we don't want to exceed existing. That is not good enough. We're not getting there with it. So, but anyway, I just wanted to say that I think everything that Fred was saying was good, but I think there are other partners that maybe we haven't identified as part of the process.
Well, and on that same note, I mean, so I was kind of tying it back to the rules when I said, is stick the only way to do it? If there is this, upwelling of groups that want to do something, how do we tap into that energy? How do we take advantage of it?
That's going to be education, right?
Yeah, I really think education outreach is going to be the thing that connects the dots to partnerships, to getting developers to want, or at least make it easy for them to understand what they can do to help protect the ecosystems. So,
since so much of this is going to fall into your bailiwick, what are your thoughts do you have any
I think
takeaways?
primarily we need to be really intentional about, again, once we narrow down the strategies that we want to do, be really intentional about identifying those audiences and tailoring those messages to those audiences, whether it's a city council or a commission or whatever that is. I mean, we do a lot of outreach to the community, but again, to those decision makers, those policy makers, I think we need to do a better job of communicating with them and having a way for them to understand what we want to do. Because it's, like you said, city staff are enthusiastic, but they need the approval from above to do some of these things. And so getting the city councils on board with this, or at least the majority of them, would, be the way to go.
Demonstrating to them that they don't have to give up their goals and priorities, that there is a way to meld it together that isn't just zero sum. You either do this or you do that. There's no in between. So, I think transportation engineering has come a long way, at least on recognizing that there is a way to build a road. Whether it gets applied or not is a different story, but there's a lot of good research and science out there demonstrating that narrower lanes are not more dangerous. That using a shared trench for utilities can provide you a place to infiltrate in the right way. So, and with that, I will turn it over to an engineer. What were your thoughts as you went through all this, Scott? I know you had some.
So a lot of what's already been said are things I had jotted down too, but for me, what what I found refreshing is seeing the various light bulbs go on from the CAC members that were there, from planning, from engineers, when we're talking about the altered hydrology or the shift in the hydrology paradigm, rather than focusing on surface runoff. It's all about surface runoff, and that's the way hydrology has been looked at for decades. We're starting to see people realize that, well, wait a minute. It's about the temperature that affects evapotranspiration, and how does that impact the infiltration or seepage, which then connects to groundwater, which connects to baseflow. Just seeing those light bulbs come on. I mean, in general, people get it. When they started to realize that, well, geez, if I can help preserve this forest or reforest this area, it can ultimately have an impact downstream on, say, the lower portion of Bluff Creek, even though it's far away. So that was what I found very refreshing, is just the commitment of, yeah, we want to do something. We see that the watershed district is in the perfect position to lead this effort and to get out in front of things, and lead by example. So that's, I mean, add to everybody else has said, that was that add.
Excuse me.
Do you all have thoughts on where we're heading, what we're doing, what you would like to see?
Big question I have
Bonnie.
is to Mr. Smith.
Bonnie raised her.
Bonnie has her.
Oh, bye.
Oh, that's okay. I wanted to step in. I think the green space issue is very important. And maybe using stewardship grants or expanding that to partner with cities. Am I echoing on yours?
A little bit.
Okay. But I think there's room there because I've heard personally from many people who want to do this, and it would be a way to partner with cities. Like, what can we do in their easements specifically that meets the goals of everyone?
So the question that I have for Mr. Smith, we obviously can't go into trying to do this because we have no real legal authority to make everyone do this, correct?
Madam President, the first question I have is, what is this? Is there a document that exists that describes this plan, or?
If we were to say we have a new initiative, and you now need to take into account our scientific information in the development of whatever that might be, the new housing development, the redevelopment of a piece of property where you're taking the house down and putting in 5 new homes. I guess I'm looking to see where the outside bumpers are, as you referred to them.
Yeah, well, we'd be eager to participate in that discussion and learn about what is being proposed. And if there's a document that exists to review, we'd be happy to do that. In general, I think the way Mr. Jeffrey has described creating a base of scientific information, a vision of ecosystem stewardship, and the notion of partnership with various jurisdictions that all have a role. That seems to me to be a very sound kind of foundation for pursuing approach. When you start to get specific, thinking about the district's regulatory role and how you will incorporate this new understanding about ecosystem protection, there will be a lot of very specific legal questions that would arise about the district's authority. And it really is pretty premature for me to speak about that because I haven't seen the plan. I don't know what's being discussed.
So the reason why I asked this question is last year at the Watershed Convention in Alexandria, there was a young man who was attempting to enforce what the rules were for that watershed in development with visiting sites and realizing that they're non-compliant. And one of the things that he said was, I try not to go in there with I have a big gun and I'm going to shut you down. More of, here's the reason why we do what we're doing, and look at it as more of a educational experience for whoever that developer or whoever was in non-compliance. And I'm starting with this question because I think it's important for all of us to agree that we probably aren't going to have the big stick to go in there to sort of enforce whatever we come up with. We're going to have to go at this the opposite direction, that there isn't enough educational knowledge and enough education and research that we've got available to give to all of those people as yet. So it may take us a little while to sort of get all of that in alignment to get it working. I don't think it's something that we're going to be able to snap our fingers and then in 2 years this is all going to be great. We're going to have to think about how we sort of set a parameter for progress. It's going to be tough to tell at the beginning which prongs we should actually follow through on. And so then we're going to need some help on, geez, what is in fact going to create the most change and the best change that we possibly can? Because I think having the big stick is not going to work. We're going to have to get a lot of cooperation from all the cities. So that's where I'm starting from, is that it looks like it needs to be more of a cooperative manner. And the first thing I thought of is we as board members are going to have to reach out more to our cities and try as much as possible to get that education, that backup. If we're going to be behind them, as Fred says, they got to know we're here and what we're trying to purport as the next step in ecological protection for water. And I think we got to have a plan about how to do that. Maybe we assign each of us to go to city council meetings. We look at what cities we're in. We try to develop city council relationships. I think that's maybe something to start at. Maybe we have some sort of a conference in another year or something where we invite city council members to come in, when we invite city staff to come in from all the cities that are involved with us and discuss, hey, here's some ideas, here's what we're thinking. I'm thinking a little bit further along in order to be able to try to get the education there and usable for everybody who needs it. It's got to be, we're working with the community to do it, and what's the best way to do it. So that's the first thing that struck me about it all.
Those are great points. So I'm going to touch on the manager council interaction first, because it's something I've actually given a lot of thought to. I reached out to Mayor Ryan from Chanhassen the other day. Then I talked to Mayor Case, and in both instances said, we would like to find a way to meet with you more often and speak more. So piggybacking on that and what you just said, I mean, my idea would be that Manager Ziegler, develop myself, go to an Eden Prairie workshop. Manager Kraft and myself go to a Bloomington workshop. You and myself go to the Shorewood, and Manager Nelson and myself go to the Chanhassen meeting and just get that face to face. What is it we've been doing? What are we looking to do? Where can we help you? On the cooperative side of it, the other takeaway was, if we can first identify what it is that makes our partner, whether it be a municipality or road authority, not want to do something, is that a barrier that we can remove? One of the most common ones we hear are long-term maintenance. Parks never want to put in boardwalks because they can't just run a truck and plow over it. So is that something where we use our stewardship program to say, well, all right, let's help you buy a bobcat and a broom so that now you can maintain that. So I think we need to identify what those barriers are, what they see as the barrier, and then find a way that we can remove it so that they are more inclined to want to do it. You know, to Mr. Smith, what we have right now are just strategies. So there are no necessarily actions that we're proposing. Like, we're not saying, here is our new water quality standard, or here is new. So now we're thinking, what can we do? What could we look at underneath that larger umbrella of water quality? We can look at stream protection, increased stream protection. We can look at different ways of calculating runoff from a site, and not necessarily using the curve number approach or the 1.1. Is there another method we can do? Can we give credit to things that right now we don't give credit to, that don't necessarily meet the 1.1 inch, but inherently are better because of all the other services that they from. So, Fred even touched on it earlier, where there's a lot of things that aren't going to be in our jurisdiction, and that's where we need to look to our partnerships to get them to want to help do that.
Do you have any comments?
So I guess I have a question. I don't know what it is about me, but I like to jump to the end. So if we had a rule, and I'm going to use that mall area, the Asian mall area, where they're going to like 95% impervious. If we had a rule that said, 50% impervious is the highest you can go, and maybe we have some flexibility about the rating for the green space. If it's turf grass, that gets you a 1. If it's forest, that gets you a 10. So that would give you more hard surfaces or impermeable surfaces if you have more forest or more native prairie. And it seems like that fits into the watershed rules, but I don't know. I mean, obviously, it's got to be a partnership with the cities. If they don't sign up for it, we're kind of dead in the water. But it seems like something that would be understandable for everybody, simple enough to monitor and to enforce, and it could have a big impact. But we need to get there. We can't just jump to the end.
This is something Scott and I have talked about a lot. How do we incentivize somebody who could go to 80% impervious to only go to 60% or to 50%? And under our current rules, we can let them use disconnected impervious surface in the MIDS model. Gets them very little because of this curve number method that is, well, we'll save that for another workshop. But yeah, so we've thought a lot about how can we do it. Now, I think Mr. Smith would jump in right away and say, we can't say you can only go to so much impervious surface because that's a zoning and that's left to the city. But can we work with the cities, to create some type of a credit system? I don't know, but yeah.
Manager Duval, do you have any comments?
Well, the thing that amazes me, and I just finished 2 days of the SALT symposium, is that every time I go to one of these things, I'm just amazed at how much information and how much expertise that's rolling around in all the different areas out there. And I think it feeds into what you were talking at the beginning about how we have all this data, we have all these different groups, they're all struggling with different aspects of the same thing. And so I think it's becoming apparent to most everybody who goes outside on any given day that we're not doing something right. We've grown over time to develop really sophisticated, comprehensive systems, but we're missing something. And I guess from my experience at this point is, again, the more I see and the more I know and learn, the more I know that I don't know that's out there. And I think that's the way it is. And from my perspective, the role of the watershed, and I think you alluded to it at the beginning of talking about the notion of dealing with water as being, kind of a foundational issue around everything. And I think it's pretty easy to make arguments that water is kind of the central theme of the way we live. And so from my perspective, my view of the watershed right now is that we're like a Mighty Mouse kind of thing in the scheme of municipalities and organizations. We have some authority, we have some money, and we have a lot of technical people to deal with pulling together the things that are out there. So I see the role of the watershed, and it's becoming more clear to me that we're a leverage multiplier in this system. So everybody, if you look at cities, they have expertise or doing elements of what we do. If you look at the different agencies in the state government, federal government, it's the same thing, but different perspective. But we're sort of on the ground. We're on the ground in a sense of we can take action. We don't necessarily need to hold the kind of meetings or get the kind of consensus to take action on things that relate to water. So I see us in the role of that we have leverage in the system, and what we want to do is turn ourselves into kind of a multiplier of sorts, a multiplier of how we can bounce and pull things together. And again, I think education comes into that. I think that's a big component. There's all kinds of expertise. We're swimming in seas of data on everything. Most of the data is not connectable at this point. Some of it is, but a lot of it isn't. So again, I think I see us as a role of a leverage multiplier of sort. So we can see, and we don't have the comprehensive view of the world. And I think, Terry, you started out at the beginning with your diagram showing all the different connections, and anytime there's an action, there's all kinds of adverse and, I guess, connective kinds of reactions for every move that we make. So we can't possibly know what all that is, but we can come at it with a focus of water. And we have our own set of rules we work with, and we have a lot more flexibility than maybe the cities do in terms of how we do this. And we'll leave that up to Mr. Smith to determine, how much flexibility we have when we're rolling around in that. But it seems to me that's where it's at. And I think one of the comments you just made, when I went to the tour of the Twin Cities watershed projects, to me, one of the overwhelming thing that hit me going on the tour was to see, at least maybe it's because it's connected more to what we're doing here, was the fact that it really, almost everything that was going on required extreme collaboration in a way that you never see in the newsprint, you never see in the real stories. And almost every project involved many different organizations, from commercial to city to community action groups. So I think that's going to be an ongoing thing. And just as another aside here, I met the new administrator of Capital Region, Anna. I spoke with her at lunch in this conference and was asking her about the roles that the managers play. And she said they do exactly what you suggested, is that we need to figure out how to get the managers engaged. We need to use our multiplier force. We have technical experts in the staff. We have our technical experts that are hired from the outside, and we need to find the people, the board members, as one group to be out connecting in the ways that we each connect individually. We all have different perspectives on how we do it. So anyway, I'll stop right there for now.
So I have another big question, and that is there any place in the United States where there has been a much more progressive effort like this that we could use as some sort of a model? Is there any place?
Prince George, Maryland, but they're not really there either.
Seattle,
Yeah.
you know, it's all around a protected species like the salmon on the west coast.
Oh, yeah.
West. I think Seattle, Portland would probably be one of the most progressive. They've been trying very hard in, you know, sound.
I'm just trying to see whether or not there's some sort of a model to help us, because we have so many different prongs and it's such a complex thing.
Yeah.
It would be helpful if we could lean on someone else that's maybe done some of the
I think there are a lot of
preliminary.
components of it out there. I just don't know if anybody's pulled together a comprehensive plan where
Yeah,
that Washington's really nice because they just got Washington Environmental Services and Ecology, and that's it. They don't have 7 different entities all battling for
Mhm.
control.
Chesapeake Bay is also,
Pardon?
Chesapeake Bay.
Yeah.
It's where they're very progressive around protecting that bay.
Mhm.
So we could look closer to them.
I might throw out just even using our own Minnesota watersheds. I mean, I know we do the surveys and we pick out little pieces. But myself going on the tour of the capital region, what they're doing and how they've connected to the communities, because they have to. I mean, it's there's if we think our groundwork is settled and resolved, I mean, there's nothing like being in the middle of the city in terms of everything is locked in place and then figuring out how to deal with it. So I'm wondering if there's any way that we could engage in some other way outside of Minnesota watersheds to pick apart kind of how they're structured and see some of the, I know it comes through, to me, it comes through when people go around and they talk to people, but is there a more direct way to do that? Rather than going all over the country, do we have something right here in the metro area, for
I don't think
instance?
we do. That's the
What?
problem. I don't think we do.
Well, I mean, so I talked to you about Lakeville. Forget Woodbury. Let's go with Lakeville. So when I was on that Bowser tour that year, they were doing amazing stuff with water reuse. And I think it'd be really cool to bring cities together so they can learn from each other. So when like Lakeville was doing that thing, I gave you some names. I don't know if I could find them now, but they were really excited about coming to something and sharing with other cities. Because I think if you see other cities doing something that incentivizes you, I guess the other thing that I want to know, I'm in the weeds kind of person. So if we ever get our hands on that property, I'd like to see if we put certain things in the ground, like 16 species here of things that hopefully would relate to what Oak Savannah or wherever what kind of infiltration are we going to get? I want to specifically know if we could put stuff in the ground and what the results, what outcomes can we actually measure from what we do within our own watershed, especially if we've got that property and we could do carte blanche. I worry, Terry and I are on a different page about this, but and I was just starting to support people the last weekend when I was out in Hackensack. To bring in species from other places, to me, is scary because not only are you. So what one forestry person was saying, well, use what you got and then see if they can adapt, as opposed to bringing something else in when you may be bringing in invasive species. You don't know what you're bringing in with that policy. Now, we don't have to go crazy on that, but I guess I want to believe in the soil health principles to the point that I want to trust nature to be resilient and see if it is. To do some experimental research and see how much infiltration can we get on that property in a certain area? And try different kinds of things. I mean, maybe that's not a good approach, but for me,
No.
I want to see the,
Actually is, because one of my pie in the sky ideas that I would love to do with all of this soil data that we're collecting and with the new site is to develop our own curve number system. One that's based on actual plants in the ground, actual
right.
soil type. actual-
We got our staffs out there working it. I want to
Yeah,
see what they got.
so no, that's not off in left field. I've been thinking about the same thing too, because we run into it with the curve number. Curve number just says, well, if you've got a lawn and it's good and you've got B soils under it and they assume that everything's, then it's this. And it doesn't,
Well,
it doesn't have enough resolution to really describe what's there.
I remember when you were still a Chan and you and Mike Wanis and I sat down and I was like, can't we do something? We're not doing anything in this watershed district. But we were trying to figure out about groundwater and it was like, well, it's going in all these different directions all the time. So I don't know how much the wells can help with that, but is there a way to have a better understanding of where those underground flows are? I mean, is that important?
Yeah.
We gave up on the idea. We walked away from it, but
So, early on when one of the takeaways is the science. There's still lacking in science, especially science that we can apply to this location. Even if we do go out to Washington and others, it's not necessarily going to be apples to apples. There's going to be principles we can take from there and try and apply, but can we? That's where his stream protection normally came from, is Washington. And
okay.
so, yeah.
So I guess what I'm trying to get at with my prompt there is I'm trying to get us to the point where we know which actions are going to have the most impact, which things will have the most long-term impact that we can adopt. And then we discuss those as a group and then try to figure out which initiatives we try to work on first, second, third. Because it's so big, we're just not going to be able to do it. It's too wide for us to look at. And I'm looking for you science people to tell me, us, in your best estimate, in your best guess, what are the best things that we should try that are going to have the most across the board impact, that are somewhat feasible for us to try to adopt? I can't come up with that. I don't know all the research.
Well, I think we know a lot of what's going to work and what isn't going to work. And I would argue that it might be a design solution more than scientific, that we understand what it takes to get water to soak into the ground. Deep roots allow water to soak in the ground. You till the soil, establish these plants, it's going to soak into the ground. The problem is the design problem because it's the way we build. So, and we have new construction versus, maintaining what we have. But I'm just talking all about the new and where we do intervene and have our regulations is when, there's a permit. So anyway, but that's our opportunity to sit at the table with the designers and talk through them about what are these other things we would like to see? Like, can you, narrower streets, fewer parking stalls, 2-story versus 1-story, so there's less roof. Prairie, not lawn. More trees shading the pavement. So we know what we want. We know that shading pavement helps. We know a lot. Can we get it designed? So in those situations, in a new build, it's a design problem. To me, it's not as much a scientific problem because I think we understand it. And then it's like everything else that's built. Okay, what can we, then it's the retrofit and how do we manage? which is the vast majority of what's built. And that's where, and this is E&O, like teaching people, what they can do with their lawns, can they narrow their driveway? Can they plant more trees? So it's, I think a lot of the science is there. And to what extent do we need to know the science is also like, we can take actions. We know that when we shrink the pavement, we're better off. And when we plant a tree and when we replace the lawn with prairie. So I think a lot of it is design and a lot of it is getting to the table with people and teaching people.
So is there any way that we could get some sort of general statements like you've suggested? And we have, here's the things that we're going to try to head towards, either with changing the rules, or we have to do a large amount of E&O on with all of our sister cities. I mean, can we do that?
We've already got Green Stuff Cities that I think we can leverage because they've got best practices, right?
Mr. Smith.
Yeah.
Just listening to Fred's list of key items, really all of those things are outside of your regulatory authority. So those are all items for voluntary outreach and education, developing relationships, promoting practices, shared agendas, a collaborative approach. But it would be 100 miles of bad road to decide to pursue that with a regulatory rulemaking.
Okay, so if that's the case, then what I'm saying is, then let's try to work at developing our relationships with our cities. We have some sort of a little agenda on education and outreach for these things. And our jobs are now going to be, how do we get this information out to the cities? How do we get involved in the conversations when there are developers coming in with new plans? And here's what we'd be promoting that would be the best for water. So that's what I'm saying is.
So where the regulatory program does fit in, and this is where Scott and I have had numerous discussions, is again, going back to how do we incentivize the developer to do the right thing, not compel them to do it, but incentivize them. And so I think what this is a great segue into the next little section, which we'll talk about the strategy groups that came out of it, talk about the metrics that we came up with, and then what I am going to actually propose is that we don't adopt this in October. You'll be off the hook for a bit, but we'll have shorter workshops. We'll go through each of those strategy groups together in just the panel discussion. What are your thoughts? What do you think would work? Do you agree with the ratings that they've got, et cetera, et cetera? So let me introduce them tonight.
Okay.
We won't try and figure them out tonight. Just put them in your head so you can think about them. I'll print you all a copy of the EHAB so you can have, and you can look through it and jot down notes and be thinking about it. And we'll, maybe have 3 workshops where we take 2 or 3 groups at a time and talk through them. But, okay, that said, so when we looked at everything that the TAP put out for ideas, came up with these 7 strategy groups. Plant protection and regeneration, which we talked a lot about tonight. Surface water management, what are things that are related to that? Education and outreach, climate resiliency, partnerships, data collection, and regulatory. Now, some of these are already existing programs that we have within our plan. Regulatory, data collection, E&O. Surface water management falls into all 3 of those. Some of those aren't as explicit in our plan. So within each of these, 79 strategies were identified. And this is how they break out into these different categories. And then if you think 79 strategies, each of them could have dozens of actions, we could be talking thousands of initiatives. So yes, to your point, we need to break it down. Where is our best bang for our buck on it? So we just looked at, in scoring these, we looked at three main things. What did we look at for? No, we looked at three things: ecosystem effectiveness, level of effort in terms of human resources needed to devote to it, and then level of effort in terms of budget. We'll just go with ecosystem effectiveness. Now, this is the one you could really go down a rabbit hole with this. So we really need to think about, we want it to be simple enough that we can use it, but not so simple that it really doesn't tell us anything. So what we really looked at are the ecosystem functions in general, the nutrient cycling, provision of biodiversity, soil biology. And then we really looked at just, does it work throughout the entire district? Does it have a benefit widely? And that's where we need to define what widely is. Is it a sub-watershed? And then, or is it specific? We scored it based on that. Well, these are the old ones, aren't they? They're flipped around. So it should be 5, right? We went with a higher score. So 5, 3, 5, 3, 1. But anyway, so that was ecosystem effectiveness. But again, you could break that out further and look at specific services within it.
You
But,
left out the water cycle.
pardon?
You left out, oh, hydrant.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. got it.
So, but yeah, you could, so maybe there's a way to make our groupings in here. But again, we were trying to come up with something that would allow us to simply evaluate initiatives and move forward. Level of effort, people. What it really boiled down to, do we have the staff right now that we could do it? Is it identified in our plan? Could we do it relatively quickly, 6 to 10 months? The next one was, again, do we have the existing staff power to do it? And could we do it within a year? And then the last one is, we'd have to get new staff. It would take extreme dedication of time. But again, flip them around, 5, 3, 1. Then level of effort, budget. Low initial expense. I think it should be and or low ongoing expense. Initial high expense, but there wouldn't be much maintenance afterwards. And then high expense initially and ongoing high expense. So that's what we did. And then I won't go into the individual strategies yet. We'll save that for another workshop and we'll go through them all. But in general, do you agree with these? Do you disagree with them? Do you wish that there was something else? Do you wish we weighted one of these three categories more than another? Is there just your initial thoughts? And we can obviously work on this further. I'll go up to you so you can read them all.
Does anybody have any thoughts?
Well, I think it fits in well with our current project scoring methodology, and we probably want to combine the two to, for picking our own projects. Now, that's part of what we do. The other, the regulatory and new development stuff, and we need something separate for that, I think.
I would agree with that.
I have a comment. How are we scoring in? See, we talk a lot about partnerships and collaboration. Is that going to be part of the strategy scoring? How difficult or challenging it is going to be to how many people we have to connect with?
That's a good point. No, it really isn't accounted for directly in this. So that's a good point.
I think that has to be put in there. I think it does. It's imperative.
Yeah.
If what we've heard from all of our cities, you gotta have my back, then that's a cooperative thing. We need to figure out how to do that. It's got to be scored with that into account. I agree, Bonnie. It's good.
And indirectly, that does fit with our existing metric. We talk about partnerships. We looked at it from a financial perspective, but I think more so it's, do we have willing partners? Do we have, how much heavy lifting do to get a city to want to do it, you know, so.
When we were thinking through this, it was the level of effort for people. We were really thinking that, you know, it is included in there, I would say, because, you know, it's like, can Terry go, you know, would Terry have to do this full time in order to do that, or and for decades to really do this, or is this a you know, can Terry, you know, do this outreach in a 6-month period with taking 10% of his time? So it was, we could do it separately if you like, but I think we took it account in that second metric.
I think it's not taking into account the number of cooperative communities we need to involve in order to make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
Are we going to need not only the conservation people who love it, but wouldn't it be nice if we had the cities, the Minnewacat and Sioux, the Audubon Society? Do you know what I mean? How many other communities could we involve to make that?
The other things that I think that would capture too then is, because one of the things we don't think about is political capital. You know, we only have so much political capital to spend. So if we spend a lot of it to get a little benefit, or a little to get a lot, so.
Yes.
Yes. Any other comments on this?
Just one other thing as you move forward is you look through these, you know, they sort out by these metrics, and you're going to look at them. This is why you need a workshop.
Yep.
You're going to look at them and go, wow, look what fell to the bottom. I would be doing that right away. And then, so this is a way of sorting it and documenting and understanding, you know, and scoring it. But really, you know, kind of your gut is going to say another thing when it comes time to really prioritizing this. And I think that's why the workshop is really important.
I think another area we need to focus on, and Liz is already doing this, when we went to the preserve thing. I mean, that is just absolutely amazing. It would be nice to know how much runoff that's stopped. You've got transpiration. It was just gorgeous. I mean, even to the point of leaving trees in the water body.
Yeah.
Because it was just, when we were on the tour at Keller Golf Course, oh my God, the planting out there was amazing. But I think about the homeowners association across from me, and they're still using gasoline powered stuff. So when I go out, it's like, they need to be converting to electric and different ways of landscaping. Than in the drought, they're still mowing down to 3 inches or less. So I think there's an opportunity there, maybe, that you're already working on some of that, Liz. And I just think that's going to be invaluable, because those people are going to need to be retrained to do landscaping differently. So are there ways we can work on with the cities on things like that? Are they doing anything, or what are they thinking? I think that's one place we could have a community.
Yeah, cities are still thinking mowing. You know, that's their plan. So,
But no, I think it's good. I think it's.
Tom, do you have any other
Nope, I think it's,
changes? Pretty good, you think?
yeah, I think it's pretty good. We've got a lot of things to sort through. We got to figure out a way to consolidate. And I think the other thing is, since all this is pulled together, we have to figure out some way where we can keep feeding it in. So we're talking about developing the next 10-year plan now, right? That's what this is about mostly, not so much the next 4 years.
Right.
Or it's some combination. So there's a lot of material to go through,
Oh, yeah.
and we should be coming up with the things where we can make wins in the near term and intermediate term, and it gets to the balancing, just like managing our money, managing our political capital.
And if I could say one thing,
Sure.
and I'm seeing this shift already. What this plan is, it's about the way we think. You guys are doing it. you're thinking ecosystem, you're thinking the watershed. You're not just thinking about the water resource, right? Because that's then kind of the narrow charge. The water resources, how are the lakes, the wetlands, and the creeks? You're not doing it. You're thinking about much broader, and I think there's the success already in the workshop series, and and you reading the plan and working with us on the plan. This is a mind shift, and things will happen. Things will happen on these lists because you're thinking that way.
Right.
Well, and also the wells thing. So recharge of, we got all these lakes and we've got the creeks, and I'm really interested to see where we're gonna go with the wells and how we can. If we don't have recharge, our aquifers are in trouble and our lakes and our creeks. So how does that all tie with what you're doing with the ecosystem, the projects you're already doing? What are we measuring in terms of outcomes and stuff? I mean, I think you've got that all factored in, but. Okay.
And one of the strategies in here is a groundwater plan,
Mhm.
and that might be
Mhm.
something.
I didn't see it exactly on the strategy.
Yeah, so
Yes.
there's another 18 slides
Yeah.
of strategy, so we haven't gone there, so we'll save that for future workshops. This is actually a good ending point. If people want to eat and take a break before the regular meeting, but I'll leave it.
I think this is,
Want me to-
I think this is exciting.
I do too.
We're charting on territory that's new and trying to figure out how we can tailor it to what we're doing, so.
I do too. I think the era of looking at water in a silo, this is the only thing we do is just this little water piece. I think that's going to change. And I think we're doing it. It'll be fun to see what we end up putting together. Okay.
I want to
so-
second, I want to
Yes.
second Mr. Jeffrey's idea of getting the managers out, or all of us, as maybe something, having short-term plans, long-term plans, but there's maybe coming up with proposals we could start to implement to begin on the relationship side.
I think that's a great idea too. Thank you, Bonnie.
And don't forget about your CAC.
Oh, yeah.
Great ambassadors.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Fred. Okay, so I think, why don't we take a break? I just need a motion to close the workshop.
I'll make a motion to close the workshop.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Smith?
Closing the workshop, Manager Crafton.
Yes.
Manager Duval.
Yes.
Manager Nelson.
Yes.
Manager Ziegler.
Yes.
President Fetters.
Yes.
Carries 5-0.
Thank you all for attending.
Audience, the same Zoom link will get you back in for the regular meeting at 7 PM.
Thank you all.
For two serious violations of Hennepin County and Carver County, for which I have commenced a lawsuit in Hennepin County. First and foremost is it's Carver County's and indirectly Hennepin County's violation of my right to be appointed as a manager of the watershed district under the veterans preference granted me under Minnesota law. Despite having informed Carver County that I have this right as a veteran under Minnesota law to be appointed as the manager, Carver County failed to reappoint me as the manager. This violation law so much for me, but for every other veteran out there, so that they are aware that there are government agencies refusing to give us veterans the rights that we have been granted by the Minnesota legislature because of our service to this great country. It's a travesty that I have been forced to start a lawsuit to protect the rights of veterans granted to them under Minnesota law. Consequently, I ask every veteran to contact me, this district, your city, county, and state officials and legislatures about this violation, so that we can join together to stop these outrageous violations of our rights that we gain by serving our country, and tell them that you expect that all government agencies to uphold our rights as veterans, because we all know that for our veterans, this country would not exist. You can contact me at lakpa471@gmail.com. Secondly, I want to bring everyone's attention. Minnesota law requires that the managers of the district be appointed to fairly represent the hydrological areas. So the public knows the district has 3 watersheds: Purgatory, Riley, and Bluff Creek. Each watershed is by definition a hydrologic area. Despite this requirement, all 5 of you managers live in 1 watershed, Purgatory Creek. That leaves 2 watersheds, Riley and Bluff, without any representation on this board of managers. This is a clear and unequivocal failure to abide by Minnesota law. I note that this is not because there were not applicants for the other watershed districts. One moment. Consequently, this board is not duly constituted and as a result does not have the authority to take any actions as managers of this district. Each of you should resign and cease to act as a manager so that Carver and Hennepin County may efficiently appoint managers in compliance with both Minnesota law regarding the rights of veterans as well as the requirement that the managers fairly represent the hydrologic areas of the district. I might ask that each and every resident of the district contact either cities and counties and state officials and legislatures and demand that you, the public, receive the representation on this board that you are entitled to under Minnesota law. Again, you can contact me at lakpa@gmail.com. I've read this letter, I've submitted it and sent it to Mr. Jeffrey and asked that be included in the record.
Thank you for your comments. Next, the reading and approval of
Is there
minutes.
anyone else?
Is there anybody else? I didn't see any other hands. Yes.
Madam President, just for the public record, we will discuss Mr. Cook's lawsuit later in the agenda and recommend going to closed session. But for the sake of the public record, I would note that Judge Joseph Klein in Hennepin County District Court yesterday issued an order. In that order, he stated that managers Nelson and Crafton are currently the serving managers, and he rejected the request for injunctive relief to halt their taking their positions based on his judgment that Mr. Cook's claims were at best doubtful in terms of success on the merits.
Thank you. Okay, so next we will proceed with the approval and reading of the minutes. First is the July 10th regular meeting minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Madam President, I make motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you.
I'll second the motion
Thank you. Are there any changes?
as written.
As written. Are there any changes? Yes, Manager Crafton.
I don't, you may disagree with this, but on page 11, on lines 241 and 242, I think it'd be cool if we would say Minnesota watersheds instead of waters. It'd be much more descriptive of what we're talking about. And then on page 13, line 316, Natural Shores is the name of a company, so we should probably capitalize N and S. That's all I had.
Anyone else? Hearing none. With the motions that we had, do you agree with the changes before we have a
Yes.
vote? Yes?
Yes.
Yes. A vote, please, Mr. Smith.
On approval of the July 10th minutes, Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Nelson,
Yes,
Manager Ziegler,
Yes.
President Pedersen.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
And the next is the minutes from the July 18th workshop of the Board of Managers.
Madam President, I move that we approve the minutes, July 18th.
Thank you.
Second.
Oh, go ahead.
Thank you. Any changes to the minutes?
No.
Hearing none. Vote, please.
On approval of the July 18th minutes, Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Nelson,
yes,
Manager Ziegler,
Yes.
President Pedersen.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Now on to item number 5, committee reports. We'll adopt the resolution. First, I'll ask if there are any questions or comments on the Personnel Committee report, the July staff report, the engineers report, or the regulatory report. Hearing none, I'm looking for a motion to adopt resolution 24-048.
I'll make a motion to adopt resolution 24048.
Thank you.
I'll second the motion.
All right. We gave everybody a chance to ask questions, so I believe we can go right to the vote.
On approval of committee reports or acceptance, Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Nelson,
yes,
Manager Ziegler,
Yes.
President Pedersen.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
And now we're looking to confirm the board rep for the September 16th meeting of the CAC.
I'd like to do that.
Manager Crafton? Okay, Manager Crafton's there. Thank you so much. And next, the consent agenda. So may I have a motion to accept the consent agenda?
I would like to make a motion to accept the consent agenda.
Second,
Second, thank you. Does anyone have any comments? Questions? No, nothing? Okay. Then I believe we're on to the vote.
Managers, just for clarity's sake, we understand the motion to be to adopt Resolution 24049 to approve the items listed on the consent agenda. Manager Crafton,
yes.
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Nelson,
Yes,
Manager Ziegler,
Yes.
President Pedersen.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
President Pedersen?
Yes.
So I guess the only thing I would ask is, we've authorized registration for us for the water resource
Conference?
conference. Do we need to tell you that we want to go, or are you just gonna?
President Pedersen, Manager Crafton, it would be nice to hear from you. I will work under the assumption everybody wants to go, and if you're not going to attend, please let me know. By the end of the week, I hope to have the reservations made. I can always cancel them though too, so.
Thank you.
Okay, buddy, you heard all of that. I wanted to make sure, right? Great.
yes.
What's the date of the conference?
It is
Through the 4th?
December 4th through
Oh,
the
yeah.
7th,
Yeah.
4th through the 7th, I believe.
Right. Okay. We are on to new business. We didn't have any items that were removed from the consent agenda, which leads us into the adoption of 24-050, authorizing the administrator to enter an agreement with Identisys to install access control and intrusion detection system. Would you like to say anything about this?
President Pedersen, manager. So we currently have a security system that was installed at least 3 tenants ago. It is an archaic system that we are no longer able to program ourselves, hence why the doors are locked at weird times. We are also currently out of access fobs for giving to new staff or interns or others to get into it. And the company that is responsible for it is a one individual company that has relocated to Wisconsin. So with that in mind, and our intrusion detection doesn't work. It no longer alerts the fire department or police department if someone comes in. So I've reached out to 3 different local providers and received 1 quote back. That quote was from Identisys. They came out to our property about 3 weeks back, walked around, looked at the system that we have, saw what they could reuse and what they would have to do new. They provided a quote of $10,675. In conversation with that and knowing that our lease here is up sometime in 2027, that we may look to relocate, I did ask if this was portable and we could bring it to our new facility, to which they said, yes, you could. And just that the wiring probably would not be worth it, but the actual control mechanisms would. This will be a cloud-based system, which will allow us to set hours, for instance, for CAC meetings or for board meetings so that the doors are open and they don't need to be propped. I would recommend, we have budget for this. It would come out of our office budget. We have adequate budget for that. And I would recommend that you authorize me to work with legal counsel to draft an agreement or to review their existing agreement and make modifications as necessary and have it installed.
Yes, Manager Crafton.
Yeah. My only question was, can we take this with us, or is this?
Yes, we are able to take this system with us.
Fantastic. Okay.
Madam President, I just had one question, again, just an incidental question. The charges, are they based on the number of times the door opens and closes?
No, the charges. So we have, there are two ways that we are charged afterwards, and that is for, we can either enter into an annual service contract, or we can do an a la carte, and I would opt for the a la carte. because once we are instructed on how to maintain that system, short of troubleshooting, I do not see need for regular maintenance with them.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I'd like to make a motion to adopt resolution. This is 24-050.
Yep.
With the caveats that Administrator Jeffrey recommended regarding legal counsel advice.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Any other discussion before we vote? Hearing no other questions or comments? Mr. Smith?
On resolution 24-050, Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Nelson,
Yes,
Manager Ziegler,
Yes.
President Pedersen.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Next, we're on to the resolution to amend the district org chart. Mr. Jeffrey, would you like to comment?
Yes, I would. President Pedersen, managers, let me share my screen here. We all know what I'm talking about. Guys. Okay. Managers, hold on. I got to move this out of my way so I can biggen it. All right. Managers, we have had a organization chart that was put into the original 10-year plan. At that time, there were 3 staff at the facility, expanded to 4. We are now at 8 staff. Sounds about right. 8 staff. And many of those staff have moved into, have taken on new responsibilities and new roles. One of which being Ms. Forbes and Mr. Monahan. So I have updated the organizational chart to reflect these new positions, as well as for the last 2 years, we have had the good fortune of having a Green Corps member to help out Staff Dickhausen with the soils plan, the wetland health program. I've added a natural resources technician position that would be able to fulfill that responsibility. So what I'm asking is to adopt this amended organizational chart as presented. Happy to answer any questions people might have about the positions or.
So I believe there was some information on the cost, or is there in the board packet? I can't remember it off the top of my head.
So the cost of this, we have budget already allocated for all of the staffing that is in here in the draft budget that has been proposed to the board.
I think it's important to also note that on the org chart, you'll see that there's grade levels where there's a 6 to 8, a 4 to 6. And the reason why there isn't a definitive grade level is just because we're going to be doing the survey that we approved. And at the point we get the results back from the survey, that's going to help us determine where the grade levels really should be. So that's why it's set up with sort of a range there rather than a specific grade level.
I think the range is a good idea, just because, if you have a really good person and
Right.
they're really good at what they do, you don't want to have to force them to change what they do just to get a grade bump.
Pedersen, Manager Ziegler, that's exactly correct. That was the other logic behind it, is so we can promote the people that are doing exceptional work and taking on more without saying, oh, sorry, you're at the end of the range.
Yeah. Bonnie, you have a question?
I see a comment, the office assistant vacant is prep meeting spaces and materials. I assume that's somebody else's responsibility at this point, or do you have plans to fill that?
President Pedersen, managers, the natural resources technician, we do have plans to backfill that. We are hoping that our current Green Corps member will stay on in that position. She would fill that. Right now, Mr. Monahan has been so good at doing this job that there is no plans in the immediate future to hire someone. We have talked with the personnel committee about finding someone with perhaps more of an accounting background or other things. So, but at this time, there is no plan to backfill that position.
Any other questions, comments?
One comment, there was a typo in Green Corps as you scrolled by.
Oh, there it is. GREN.
Oh,
Thank you, Bonnie.
So I'd like to make a motion to adopt resolution 24-051, amending the district organizational chart.
Second?
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Hearing none. Mr. Smith?
On adoption of resolution 24051, Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Nelson,
Yes,
Manager Ziegler,
Yes.
President Pedersen.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
We're now to discussion items. The first item is the 2025 budget and levy. Mr. Jeffrey, would you like to comment on this?
absolutely. Share. Well. Share. Okay. President Pedersen, managers, at our last meeting, we presented to you a draft budget, and there was questions at that time of what has been our reserves and or carryover funds from year to year. So I went back through the audits that we have and tried to suss out where we were at. So I'd like to go through that with you, what I found in those. There was a memo that was provided to you as well, which will have the same information in there. So again, just for a refresher, this is what we proposed at the July 18th workshop. We proposed a total levy of 4.249 million. We anticipate unspent monies from 2004 to be about 4 million. We anticipate another 429,000 in additional revenue for total assets, which to formulate the 2025 budget of 8.69 million. Assuming we spend and do all of the projects that we have programmed for 2025, there is $6.4 million worth of projects programmed. This includes hiring an architectural firm to look at the Spring Road project. This involves UAAs and other background information necessary to start the planning process. This includes actual money for strategic planning, mission, vision, and values, as well as enough to do the upper Riley Creek project and the design of Upper Bluff, as well as to do the Kerber Ravine project and design of North Lotus Lake and a few other items. If we expend that fund by the end of the year, we would have about 2.3 million left over. And this was where the question came from. Is that consistent with what we have had in years past? So this is from a review of the financial audits going back to 2016. It shows our assets, our committed funds, so those projects that we have programmed that we may or may not have spent that year, but either way that funding was allocated for. And then really reserves might be a misnomer because this will include all unspent funds that are not committed to a project. So this might be E&O funds that did not get spent, grant monies that didn't get spent, data collection, et cetera, salary. So while it wasn't programmed reserves, it was money that was allocated for those administrative features that did not get utilized. My predecessor and myself have programmed reserves in to the budget themselves. These were not in the audit. These were shown on the far right column. varying anywhere from 50,000 to 230,000, but roughly about 120,000 a year on average was set aside. So that's about 1.06 that has been dedicated specifically to reserves. However, because we commingle our funds, this isn't sitting in a separate fund, but is accounted for. This column, the final column, was derived from the annual budgets that were submitted. It was not in the audit report. So these programmed reserves, I just looked back at each adopted budget and looked at what was programmed. Looking at the budget and levy itself from 2016 through 2025, the far left column is our levy each year. The bottom being 4.249, what I'm proposing this year. The budget each year, or anticipated spending. Then the budget spent each year. This is coming from our Red Path February Treasurers reports. And so the last column is carryover, but this is different than this reserve fund, because this carryover may well count committed funds or funds that were levied for a project that aren't in. But in general, we have had a carryover of anywhere from 1.5 to our high watermark 4.8. That was the COVID year where nothing was really done. So I think it is my opinion that the 2.3 we are proposing to carry over is consistent with what we have had in the past. That would represent a 5% levy increase. If we were to carry forward 2.2, that would be a 4.5% levy increase. I would actually encourage looking at the 4.5% levy increase and then working in future years to start to build that back up again through our reserves. But I leave it to the managers. We can, what you would like to set for our levy and budget. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them to the best I can.
So I would advocate for the 5%, but I would certainly be willing to look at a forecast over a number of years. I didn't like the idea of having a big jump like 1 year or 2 years out, which is, I think, harder for the counties to justify. And we don't know what future years are gonna, the budget might be pretty tight on the same year we want to have our jump, so.
Yes.
President. Couple questions on the memo that you sent out. So you go back to the previous table, the one that showed the program reserves, and did you say that came from the audit reports or from the, not from the audit report?
Correct, not from the audit report. The program reserves are monies that were actually budgeted in the adopted budget for reserves.
So I think in the memo, it says the opposite. It says it comes from the audit reports.
Oh, yeah, sorry. The reserves, this column, the reserve column comes from the audit report.
Well,
Programmed reserves come from.
it says table 1, so. Anyway, so the other question I have is on the next page. So, and then on the report here, it said, this was to the point you just made. So if we, for example, by carrying a reserve of 2.2 million, the resulting levy increase would reduce by 2.5%. Did you say, so is it a reduction of 2.5% or is it?
It should be 0.5%. It would reduce to 4.5%. Yeah, that would be a typo.
Okay.
It would reduce by 0.5%.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Yes, Bonnie.
I have a comment. I would recommend that we go with the reduced budget because in this era of increased levies, I know for Carver County, City of Chanhassen, there's a lot of additional levies being increased because of downtown development and city center development. They have a potential sales tax increase. And if we can't justify a need for the additional money, I feel like we're and we can, 4.5% covers all of our liabilities and program capital projects. I don't in good conscience think we should approve a higher levy.
President Pedersen,
Yes.
it does not cover our capital projects. The reserve would
Okay.
not cover our capital projects. The budget covers our program
Excuse me.
capital projects.
The proposed.
Yep.
I was trying to summarize what we got in the memo. I did
Yep.
that too quickly.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Yes,
Yeah,
Manager Crafton.
I guess I would go with 5% or encourage that, just because we're undertaking a new project with the acquisition, and just to be sure that we've got everything covered. I don't want to get us into trouble where all of a sudden we need something and we don't have enough, so.
President Pedersen, manager, so that 0.5% reduction would be money that would go towards planning. So it'd be money that we will have to make up at some point down the road. So again, it's, as Manager Ziegler said, would that result in a larger jump in a future year? Perhaps. Really will depend on our bidding environment for some of our other projects.
I think I would agree with Manager Crafton and Manager Ziegler that I would rather have us have the money in the bank than suddenly we are looking at how are we going to fix this problem. So I would go with the 5%.
Madam President?
Yes.
I would agree with the comments, those comments also.
Okay.
5% is, I think, is below what most of the municipalities are dealing with. I saw a report a couple months back, and many are approaching 10%. So 5%, I think, is going to be below the radar of what most people are dealing with.
President Pedersen, managers, again, tonight there is no action. We will have our public hearing on the 5th.
Take an action to set the public. Can I help with that?
We've already called the public hearing. Yeah, they passed a resolution to
And
order
what
the
was
public
the
hearing.
budget amount that they set it for?
It was the
This.
5%. Here, yeah. So we will, at our September 11th meeting, have the public hearing. The public will also have another opportunity to speak to it in December, but it won't be a public hearing at that time. By September 15th, we need our budget and levy to the auditors for Carver and Hennepin County. Remind everyone that we will have an opportunity to reduce the levy after we submit it, but we cannot increase the levy after it's submitted.
Any other comments or questions before we move forward? Hearing none. Next, we are on to the discussion of Larry Cook's pending lawsuits against us. We would go into closed session for this. Yes.
Madam President, I would recommend that the board go into closed session for the purposes of receiving confidential legal advice concerning litigation strategy regarding 2 active lawsuits in which the district is a defendant. The first is Larry Cook versus Riley Purgatory Bluff Creek Watershed District and Terry Jeffrey. That concerns the Spring Road Conservation Project. And the second lawsuit is Larry Cook versus Riley Purgatory Bluff Creek Watershed District, Carver County, Hennepin County, Bonnie Nelson and Jill Crafton. That concerns the appointment of the 2 most recent appointments of the managers.
So, yeah, I'd like to make a motion to go into closed session for what Attorney Smith just stated.
Thank you.
Second.
And Jill Crafton has a second. I believe we need to take a vote on this.
On going into closed session, Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Nelson,
Yes.
Manager Ziegler,
Yes.
President Pedersen.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Manager reports, and we left this blank because we are interested if there's anything you would like to say. Yes,
Yes.
Manager Duval.
Madam President, so I just attended a 2-day Bolton and Mink Connie Fortin salt symposium, and there was about, as far as I could tell, looked like a couple hundred people from 3 different countries, and dealing with all issues relating to salt and how it's used. And it's kind of eye-opening at times, but the other thing is, it was at the beginning, it was like a chemist slash somewhere between a chemistry and a biology class. They were talking down at the molecular level about how the chloride interacts with various compounds and the way it works into our water system. So I think that the takeaways are that there's a lot of work being done in a lot of different areas across the U.S. primarily, at least as it relates from this firm. And I guess I was kind of surprised, at least I wasn't aware of all the basic areas where chloride gets into the water, and it's road salt, obviously, but it's also water softeners, and it was a big issue. And I guess there's like 20 municipalities in the state now that have city water softening. And I think the numbers they were using, like about 50% of the chloride, and Bonnie, maybe you know this already, but 50% of the chloride comes from soft water softeners in the system. And then the other part that I was not aware of is how much agriculture contributes to this, the farming techniques and the crops and the way the chemistry works with the nutrients. The chloride is partially used for the plant growth, but it's a big component also of chloride in our water system. So at the beginning, I was talking about chloride getting into our water systems, and which was really interesting. And then the second day today was talking about snow and ice management. And again, there's people trying all different kinds of things locally and around the country, and some of them are sort of working, and some are still in the very early stages of experimental. And as we were talking about things to do with the land in terms of experimenting with things, people are doing that with chloride and the different types of chloride. Anyway, it was interesting, and there may be some applications we might consider working into the land at some point dealing with that. So it was interesting. Oh, and also all the presentations, and some of them are very technical, as I mentioned. They're all available, and I'll get them and I'll send them to Terry. So if there's anybody on the staff that wants to access those, and some of them, as I mentioned, are quite technical in terms of how the different chemicals work in the process. So anyway, it was worthwhile. It's hard to sit in the chair in my home office, but that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other managers? Yes, Manager Crafton.
Well, kind of related to that, but not, so I think it's St. Louis Park. I have a friend who's real into renewable energy and reducing our carbon footprint. And anyway, there was a discussion with Centerpoint, and they're thinking about using the pipes in which they bring natural gas to the house to transfer geothermal heat. So if they could do that, if they could put it under a road, is there any way that we could stop having to use so much salt? I don't know. But it was just interesting that they're thinking that way. They're moving in that direction because it would help them.
So the last presentation today was talking about roadway heating systems, and I think Midland, Michigan has one of the largest one in the country, and they use actual water. They started out using lake water, but that corroded the system from Lake Michigan, and so they started using potable water in their system, and it works well. But the reason it works is that it's using waste heat from the power plant that's located there, the electricity generating plant. And then they went into some other examples today of smaller systems, and it's pretty complicated in terms of how they work, and there's nothing on the scale of like Midland, and Midland was the result of having waste heat.
So if you get on Robert Street in St. Paul, that has
It's another one, yeah.
a lot of pipe.
It'll be interesting to watch that to see if there's ways that we can accelerate that or use it. That would be really nice to have to move away from.
Any other manager comments? Yes.
So I'd like to just state I do plan to go to the annual Minnesota Watersheds Conference for all the days.
Okay.
And ask the question, I know last year we didn't send any people from the CAC, but prior years we had
Yep.
at
I can
least
look at
made it.
I can look at the budget. This is a lot more expensive arrangements than our last ones, this new place.
it?
Yeah, it's,
This place is really a very, very nice
it's
place.
about 260 a night per person.
Yeah, it's really nice. Our lake cabin was very close by there, and that's kind of the really nicest place in Nisswa you can stay in. So it's a big change for us.
But I will look at the budget and I'll see what we have, if there's adequate to send at least a couple of CAC members. I would like them to be ones that haven't been before. Get some new.
So what about the Water Resource Conference at the U?
Is that the one in downtown St. Paul? Are you talking about that one?
Yeah.
That's on upcoming. Yeah. I'd be interested in going that one as well.
I need to know the date. Is that one in December too?
That's October.
Oh, it's October. I need to know the dates before I can tell you that.
I can send out an email.
Yeah. Any other manager comments? Yes, Bonnie.
Yes. Well, I'd actually first like to thank everybody, the managers and the district staff for the very warm welcome I have received to the board. And I feel very supported and I'm really looking forward to working with all of you. And I also wanted to point out, attending is one of the CAC members, Dave Paulson in the back, who thought he was going to speak today. And the CAC, since they canceled their meeting, did not have a item on the agenda, which I did not notice until we were well into it. So I actually wanted to at least recognize him for being there.
No wonder I can't find the pen.
Thanks for coming.
Am I excused?
Yeah.
I do have something to say.
Yeah,
to you.
why
Oh,
don't-
good.
Good.
If-
Okay.
Oh, can we?
Yeah, have at it.
Sure.
Here, wait, hold on.
All right. This is my first time here.
Yeah.
Oh.
You can stand up and
Oh,
croon if you want.
yeah. You do not want to hear me sing, I can guarantee you. Is this on? Am I-
Yep. Yeah, it doesn't amplify here. It's for the people at home.
Oh, okay. All the people at home. Yeah, so, okay. Dave Paulson, Citizen Advisory Committee representative tonight. And here's my report. There was no July meeting, lack of quorum. We are continuing to discuss both the water conservation scoring for residential as a concept, and then the water conservation audit, talking about that. But we haven't come to anything definitive to report or recommend to the board. We've also initiated the discussion on the concept of water as a common good. Common good, the term is used in the economic field and in civic governance. And thinking about how best to present that concept to the public, to show the basis of the authority for the watershed district. We want to educate people on why the regulations that they might not like imposed on them is for the good of everybody, and that's the common good concept. And so how to get that into the E&O, the part of your charter is another subject that we're looking at. No definitive recommendation yet. And then as we missed the meeting, I wanted to tell everybody, personal interest kind of thing, that we're asking Andy Forbes to come back and talk about bird ecology, which he couldn't do. And that's it. But I should entertain questions.
A question. So is the common good the same as public trust doctrine in terms of that common?
Well, it's almost called the commons. I use the term common good, but it's really called the commons. What does everybody need? Air, water,
Right.
law, order. you know, they get into some esoteric things, but it's clean air and clean water are not esoteric. So that's the commons. And it's been a long held legal principle that
Mhm.
that's why governments get to protect the common. And individuals have to sometimes feel like they're suffering. But that's not a concept that's apparent in the literature very much, but so we're discussing whether or not that would be useful to, as a concept to push into the literature.
I know in Michigan, where I grew up, Nestle's mining the water, and then they're selling it. So it's whether that was public good
Yeah,
versus,
exactly. I mean, that's, you know, there's a lot of,
Yeah.
you can argue about it, but it's still a concept that's been there. Including it was, you know, it was discussed a lot in the founding of this country too. So that's just a subject.
I think,
Because we don't have a firm recommendation, we just want to let you know the subjects that we're discussing.
I think it's great.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Glad you had a chance to speak.
Thank you, because I was sitting here waiting like a dummy.
I was gonna
When's it
call
gonna
you after
happen?
this. I was gonna call you after this. Yeah, you weren't on because there wasn't a
Yeah.
quorum, there wasn't a meeting.
I believe that concludes the manager reports. We are on to upcoming board topics. I think we already talked about the public hearing next month, the adoption of the levy and the budget, the staff retreat. Do you want to say anything about that at all, Mr. Jeffrey?
We are still trying to schedule. We're probably looking at October to schedule. We need to get all the managers, but this would be really just continuation, or actually the initiation of our planning, mission, vision, values, and getting us all moving in the same direction.
I think you were thinking maybe around the 17th of October.
Yes, thanks. That is what we would talk about.
So might want to put that on your calendars just so that you're,
Because the 17th, we had a workshop anyway. But I
Yep.
would like to move it earlier so that we can spend some time together.
right.
We can. go
And I
down to
believe-
the property.
We've talked about the upcoming events, which leads us to a motion to adjourn.
Like to make a motion to adjourn?
You?
I'll second.
Oh, second. Thank you. And a vote, please, Mr. Smith.
To adjourn, Manager Crafton.
Yes.
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Nelson,
Yes.
Manager Ziegler,
Yes.
President Pedersen.
Yes,
And carries 5-0.
I don't think we've ever been out of this.
and we're adjourned.